All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Ariel Rivers, NACD's Pacific Region Representative, and I will facilitate this 1-hour NACD Urban and Community Conservation webinar. Thank you for joining us to learn about some of the challenges associated with urban agricultural projects. The monthly Urban and Community Conservation webinars are offered by NACD through the support of our sole sponsor, the Scotts Miracle-Gro Company. These sessions are designed by NACD's Urban and Community Resource Policy Group, a subcommittee of district officials and partners charged with guiding the association's services and support for districts' work in developed and developing areas. Our goal through these programs is to share our goal through these webinars is to help districts share what they are doing nationwide and enable them to learn from each other in various agencies and organizations. We appreciate the support of Scotts Miracle-Gro for making them possible. We will record this webinar and post on NACD's website along with a PDF for the presentation for future access. Please share widely with your networks and anyone who may be interested in seeing this or previous presentations. Please keep yourself muted for the duration of today's webinar. After the presentations, we will also have a question and answer session. Please type your questions in the chat box and the facilitator, me, will read them for the recording. We'll address as many as we can. So before we get started, I'd like to share a few updates on behalf of the NACD's Urban and Community Resource Policy Group. First, I encourage all of you to learn more about our joint NACD-NRCS Urban Agriculture Conservation Grant Initiative with information available on our webpage, and I'll link that in the chat box. This year, we awarded the 5th round of funding for a total of over $5 million awarded to 122 projects. These projects are excellent models for engaging with new and underrepresented clients, and we also have several past webinars featuring these grantees on our webinar page. Second, some of these grantees are located in the 11 cities where the USDA Farm Service Agency will soon implement county communities for urban agriculture. FSA is currently looking for nominees for these committees with applications due August 2nd. So I'll link that in the chat box as well. And finally, USDA has several grant opportunities open for community compost projects and planning and implementation of urban agriculture projects as well. Deadlines for these grants are in July, so I'll also include information about those in the chat box too. And now I will introduce our two speakers for today, Jacob Hamlisher and Janine Ribka of the Cuyahoga Soil and Water Conservation District in Ohio, one of our districts through the joint NRCS NACD Urban Ag Conservation Grant Initiative. Jacob is the urban technician for the district and took over management of their 2020 UAC grant last year. And he is an experienced outreach manager with a demonstrated history of working in the environmental services industry. He's very dedicated to his local community and is often applying his background in civil engineering to adequately address urban conservation and agricultural problems. Jan is the director for Cuyahoga, and having got apologies.
Cuyahoga.
And she's guided the district's programs for many years. Both of them can correct me on the pronunciation of their names as well as the district. This is the district's second UAC grant, and Jan is an excellent resource for developing and implementing new programs at scale with a multitude of partners. So thank you both for your presentations today, and I'll hand it over to you to get going.
Okay, great. All right, we're going to make sure we're at that. Okay, can you see that? It's good? Okay. Thanks. You know, we have been so fortunate to have participated on numerous webinars, and even more fortunate to now have our second UAC grant. And so I'm just here to kind of tee it up for Jacob, who has just been a great source of pride and energy. To have him on staff, I just love him, and he's taken over a project from somebody that was here previously, and that's part of what he's going to talk about, the challenges associated with that. So I'm just going to give a little bit of background. Some of you may have, heard a little bit of this background in the past, but just to get you acquainted with who we are and where we are. We are in Cleveland, Ohio, and it's a beautiful day today, beautiful summer day, no clouds in the sky, and probably hovering around 77 degrees, so that's awesome. Anyway, so growing conservation and urban environment, and we'll just take it from there. Our SWCD was formed in 1949, so 72 years strong. Like many of the SWCDs out there, I think our programs are all very similar, but we're implementing programs and advocating for best management practices to promote and protect and restore healthy soil and water resources. And that's our website down there. Please take a look. We love when people tap into our information because we tap into a lot of yours as well. This is going to give me a hard time. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so we do have 4 main program areas, and they're really not silos because we do a lot of cross training. And staff is always collaborating with each other to get the job done. And they've really had some great fun working with Jacob because he takes them out to the field to work on some of our urban ag projects and just have a lot of fun with that. But in addition to administration, we have our conservation education, and then includes stormwater, pollution prevention education, our natural resources program, which envelops the urban ag work that we do, our stormwater pollution prevention, and our watershed protection efforts. We have 14 staff people and an AmeriCorps team member that work with us. This is like jumping around. So a little bit about Cuyahoga County, most urban county in the state of Ohio. It's really pretty funny. So here you see a slide of the county. And if you notice, the county boundaries go out into Lake Erie up to the boundary in the middle of Lake Erie between the US and Canada. So of those almost 1,300 square miles, only about 500 are land. And of that land, in terms of agriculture, 1.5% is in agricultural lands. That's not much at all. I think to understand Cleveland and Cuyahoga County, you have to understand our history. So going back to the teens and the 20s, we were the 5th largest city, Cleveland was, in the nation. And it was an economic powerhouse, real full of traffic. We had the Roosevelts here, just great industrial titans. And you could see by the slide how the population, it peaked in the 50s, in the 70s, as we started seeing corporate America, the manufacturing plants kind of going elsewhere. We started seeing the population decline. That's in the city. And you can see comparatively in the county where the population started expanding into the county, and then now where that population has expanded outside the county to the 5-county region. What's left, and you can see by the pictures there on the right, is that industrial heritage and the outward migration that has left the inner city core with a lot of vacant lots. And we were the epicenter of the housing crisis in the early 2000s. And the slide at the top depicts, it's a map of Cleveland area, the Forgotten Triangle, which is probably about a mile from our office right here, a couple miles from downtown. It was packed with homes back in the day, and now you can see it's a lot of green space. And for somebody like me who's always lived in the city to see a city that you had just dense housing, that now there's all this open space, is a little disconcerting. But because of that, we've had some opportunities and people taking advantage of that land to do some urban farming. So in about the mid-2000s, there was an effort, it was a collaborative effort, the city of Cleveland, Kent State University and the Cleveland Urban Design Collaborative that brought all the stakeholders together to talk about how could we reimagine the city of Cleveland? What could we do about these just at one time 15,000 vacant lots? And that was even before they started taking all the homes down, right? The vacant homes, vacant properties. So this stakeholder group came up with a plan and policy recommendations, including urban agriculture, and trying to transform that non-traditional vacant land, urban land, into something that could maybe store stormwater, do some urban gardens, and those type of things. So the working group, they identified that there were about 1,700 acres, which for I think a lot of folks in Ohio, out in like Northwest Ohio or wherever, 1,700 acres is the size of somebody's farm. But they, a working group said, well, we have 1,700 acres of vacant lands that are like really prime agriculture lands, and they try to promote it as such. So there was a really great big push for urban agriculture, especially in Cleveland, and it was aided by Terry Cosby, who's now out in Washington. He was the NRCS state conservationist, great guy, and Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, who was also in the Biden administration in HUD. And they got together and talked about these opportunities for urban agriculture. And Terry assigned somebody in NRCS to come in and work on a seasonal high tunnel program to help people. Because let's face it, up here we're north, and we have a great our climate's pretty temperate, but we do have 4 distinct seasons and not a very long growing season. So the high tunnels to provide an opportunity for people to extend those growing seasons. And there were a lot of people that took advantage of it. Unfortunately, now, all these years later, we're talking about maybe 18 years in, that maybe 1/3 to 1/2 are still standing. So as we're getting ready to hear from Jacob, just again, the 2016, we got our first grant, and that grant was to develop the blueprint to urban agriculture, and that's an online document, if you will, and then various grants to tackle the issues that we have here in Cuyahoga County, legacy, industrial soils, compacted soils, you know, where those homes used to exist. Of course, tapping into the whole idea of soil health and pollinator gardens, and here in Cuyahoga, especially the urban tree canopy. We've gotten grants to do workshops and tree plantings, and now, well, last year in 2020, just at the best time ever for everyone, grant to work on food forests. So lastly, I just want to just some slides of some of the programs we do and the, you know, whatnot. Lastly, I just want to talk about, in addition to what Jacob's doing, that the one thing here in Cuyahoga County, and I think this is resonating, I've spoken to so many people at other conservation districts around the country, that the urban tree canopy, just not here in Cuyahoga County or nationally, it's worldwide, and there's huge movement. It's so great to see so many people that are promoting and advocating for trees because of the many, many benefits that it has. So all of our tree programs now, we adopted from another nonprofit organization, the Cuyahoga Relief. It's kind of a play on words, and all of our tree programs, whether it's the watershed programs or our tree plantings or tree giveaways, and the work that we do with Cuyahoga County's Healthy Urban Tree Canopy Grant Program, is all kind of housed under that umbrella, if you will. And a couple other things that we did also. So this is kind of what we're doing with urban ag, soil health, and the trees. A couple other things that we did is our legacy tree donation program, and that's new. And our board is going to match any donations, and we're teaming up with 4 cities to plant trees in the spring and the fall. And then we started something new called our Conservation Action Grants, and that is our way to try to get out into the broader community and provide some funding for people to do conservation projects in their own neck of the woods. So with that really quick overview, thank you very much. Love being here, and turn it over to Jacob.
Thanks for that, quick intro there, Jan, explaining kind of everything that the district does. I'll go into a little bit more detail on some of the stuff she talked about, but today we're talking about challenges facing urban agriculture, specifically our 2020 NACD grant, and kind of how you can use those challenges as opportunities.
My name is Jacob Hamlish.
Sorry about that. Hold on one second. Having some technical difficulties, just like Jan was.
My name is Jacob Hamlisher, and I am an urban technician with Cuyahoga Soil and Water. I graduated with a civil engineering degree in 2016 from Cleveland State. This first picture is me when I first started in urban agriculture in 2014. I got involved in urban agriculture because I wasn't interested in pursuing my major. I already knew 2 years into my degree that I wasn't going to be doing that full time. And I told my parents I wanted to be a farmer, and they said no. And so I found an internship at a land conservancy that allowed me to practice farming and do farming, urban agriculture stuff specifically. I was interested in it specifically because my grandfather had a large garden when I was growing up, and always talked fondly about his memories of working on a farm in his younger years. Urban agriculture is definitely an interesting animal, and I learned a lot, especially starting early on as I helped manage the Kinsman farm in Cleveland. I was sort of thrown into the fire right away, which I think was good for me. It taught me a lot of lessons, like I said. And as you'll find out in this presentation, challenges are not necessarily bad. They lead to lessons learned, which are always important. Moving on, I started at Cuyahoga Soil and Water in May of 2020 and hit the ground running with a lot of grant projects and working almost full-time in the stormwater inspection portion of our organization. As Jan mentioned earlier, this NACD grant is one of the many grants that we currently have for urban agriculture, and we're always looking to expand our program. Now I'm going to give a little bit of background on the grant itself that we'll be primarily focusing on today. It was awarded to Cuyahoga Soil and Water from the NACD in the beginning of 2020. We had written the grant kind of as a pivot from what normally is done in urban agriculture. We, as an organization, felt that there were numerous good examples of intensively managed vegetable crop production, but we did not think that there were enough of the permaculture, so to speak. Specifically, this grant is written to establish food forests, so tree-based perennial agriculture. And so we determined that we would like to do 2 different sites. Initially, we had written the first site to be a smaller site with 10 to 14 tree and shrubs that would be more orchard-like and focused around a school. That way we could have programmatic involvement with children, obviously, which is super important in our view to start establishing the love of gardening and the love of growing young, and that way it can be continued forward. So our first site we determined would be a school site, and the second site we partnered with Coit Road Farmers Market, which is located in a historically disadvantaged neighborhood. It is also one of the oldest markets continuously running in the greater Cleveland area. And we chose this site to be more of a community asset. Obviously, still have some learning and teaching aspects to it, but we wanted this mostly to be served, to serve the community in a way that would enhance it, provide green space in an area that doesn't have a ton of access to green space, provide kind of a link between the neighborhood and the market, as well as provide food for the people in the neighborhood who might not have access, aside from the market, to fresh food, especially stuff that's grown right on trees, and kind of also be able to show that this is something replicable that can be done in your backyard. Since we're working in urban areas, we, are planning it to have that more park feel, but also be something that could be replicable in anyone's backyard. We were also focusing primarily on native species or native adjacent or native cultivars. This was twofold. If it's a native plant, it'll have less trouble time growing in the climate that we're planting it in. And B, we wanted to also provide that, again, educational aspect that fruit and nut and other edible tree, bush species, stuff that you would find generally in the forest, that there are edible native things in this area. And it's not just pears and apples and oranges and blueberries that you can eat, that there are plenty of natives that grow around here in the wild that you can eat. Another reason that we chose this more permaculture forward approach is that at the district we felt a need to start moving towards a more sustainable and a more stormwater restorative approach to agriculture that wasn't just traditional row crops, which obviously have their place, but we were trying to create something that showed reforestation along with soil health and stormwater mitigation, and that it could all be wrapped up and also provide food and a community asset instead of traditional, having it traditionally broken up as agriculture is one thing, restoration's another thing. We kind of wanted to combine them to show that you can do more than one thing on your specific plot or area that you're working in. So now that you have a bit of background on the organization and the grant that we'll be focusing on primarily today, I'd like to lay out some of the major challenges that we faced with this specific grant, but I think it's pretty applicable to most urban projects like this, primarily agriculture related, but anytime you're doing any sort of urban project, I think you face these issues. At least in my 7-ish years of experience, these are kind of the big issues that I've faced. So the first issue I want to talk about will be staff changes or just staffing in general and staff needs. The next one specifically will be focusing on the pandemic, but in a broader sense, it will be mostly about acquisition of materials, especially niche materials. Third, I'm going to talk about neighbors and with that other neighborhood organizations and groups. Next, I'm going to talk about site partners, partner organizations that might be working with you on your grant. And finally, I'm going to finish with site ownership and acquisition. This is what I think is the most important, and that's why I'm finishing on it. Before we move on, I love using Teddy Roosevelt quotes, one of my favorites. I think everybody can find a good Roosevelt quote if they look hard enough. You don't actually have to look that hard. He's got plenty of good wisdom. But I think it's really applicable to urban agriculture and urban work. I always kind of keep this in my mind when thinking about it. The quote is, "Nothing in this world is worth having or worth doing unless it means effort, pain, and difficulty." And I think that really embodies urban agriculture work. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not easy work. If it was easy, everybody would do it. And it's important work to be done. And I think anything important is definitely going to have its challenges. And so with that, we'll move on to staff changes. So with staff changes, I mean, we literally had a staff change from the person who wrote the grant to me who took over the grant. The person who wrote the grant left at the beginning of 2020, and Cuyahoga Soil and Water kind of didn't know what was going to happen next right after they were awarded with the grant. But luckily, I was able to pick up the loose ends pretty quickly, and because of my background in urban agriculture, able to step in. Obviously, this presents the issue of your quote unquote loss of vision, because even if the person before wrote a lot of stuff down and had a pretty good outline of what they were looking for, they're still the one who had the initial vision and the initial thought to apply for the grant and what the project was going to look like start to finish. And so you definitely lose that when you lose a staff person. You can also lose some of the relationships that have been built that may be crucial to the project, as well as the historic background and knowledge, aside from the vision, that might have been put in with partner organization sites, challenges that have been already faced, stuff like that. However, I think it can be a good thing if looked at in the right way, like anything can. I think it also presents, where there's challenges, present opportunities, and it presents the opportunity for some fresh, new ideas maybe to come into the project, as well as, maybe a different way of going about doing things. I think that this is important because it can, two heads are better than one sometimes, so it can give your project a whole new meaning or deeper focus or better partnerships or new lasting partnerships, among many other things. So that's definitely a challenge we faced, and the way our organization handled it was just to kind of keep our eyes focused on the end prize and push forward and make it work with the staff that we had in place. And I think it's important to be fluid when you're doing this, to set expectations early about what's going to happen. And obviously, if you have some forewarning that there's going to be a staff change, get as much of the information as you can before, which seems simple enough, but a grant and a project like this really does live in the head of the grant writer a lot. And so it's really important to get as much of that vision and that background and history, as well as partners and people who might be silent partners or potential partners, all kind of down on paper, and have people meet each other before handing off, is definitely a way you can combat some of the challenges that can be faced with this. So next, I would like to talk about, I'm going to talk specifically about the pandemic, but it mostly has to do with acquisition of materials and how that can present a challenge. For us specifically with the pandemic, obviously, aside from it's tough to meet with people in person and get all that stuff, there was a shortage on trees and a lot of other building and goods materials. It was really tough to find a lot of the stuff, especially when you're talking about specialty natives that aren't necessarily grown in large quantities at nurseries. So that presented obviously a unique challenge. And then not being able to go in and see the stock or talk to people because maybe they were furloughed or laid off. That really, that led to a lot of snags and stuff when we were looking for our products, because when you're planting trees, our obviously the focus is not just to plant them, it's to grow them. And so you want good stock from a trusted place. And so if you're not able to go and look at the stock, it can make it super difficult. And so obviously this was something that everybody was navigating with last year, but it can be an issue even in non-pandemic times if you're planting something like a native food forest, and most places don't necessarily keep in stock in the quantity you need, at least usually, if at all, the plants you're looking for. And so, and it could be any other material depending on your project. And so it's really important to use your network of people to reach out, maybe other local SWCDs or affiliated partners, organizations, land conservancies, park systems, et cetera, to kind of reach out to see, or if anybody else has done something similar to what you're doing in your area, reach out and see where they went and got their stuff from. We were lucky enough to be able to find a nursery that was willing to work with us. And not only that, but then that led to a good partnership. And they were happy that we were, doing business with them because their business was also hurting. And so, sometimes that can even lead to things like in the future. Now I can go back and if I'm writing a grant, I can ask them for an in-kind donation or something along those lines to help offset the cost of a grant potentially. And so you always got to look at things from the bright side and, okay, we're all maybe struggling with this, or this presents a unique challenge. How can I flip this challenge around and make a good opportunity out of it? And we were definitely able to do that in this case by finding a new, smaller local nursery that was able to get the things we need. And they had good stock, and I trusted the people they had on staff were knowledgeable. And, we formed a partnership that I think is going to last beyond the grant and into the future. Now I'd like to talk about neighborhood groups, neighborhood organizations, neighbors themselves, vested stakeholders that aren't necessarily partners on the project or the city per se. They're important, obviously, because this is going to be in their backyard, so to speak. And so you need to get buy-in, and you need to get buy-in fairly early from these people. You don't want to be fighting an uphill battle of people not necessarily interested in the project or wanting this project in their area. And it can definitely be a struggle. I know a lot of times people living in the city definitely can be adverse to having green space near them because to them it doesn't look manicured, or it attracts undesirable animals potentially, or I've heard a lot that it provides a place for people believe drug use to occur, or a hiding spot for criminals, or all kinds of stuff I've heard. And so you really have to get community buy-in almost, as soon as you have the idea for the project, start working on community and neighborhood buy-in, whether that's working with local working groups, CDCs, development corporations, all kinds of those neighborhood groups. And just sometimes it's as much as getting partner organizations together that are partnering on the grant and going and knocking on doors and saying, hey, we're going to have a forum. This is what we're planning on doing within the neighborhood. We want to get your input before we start doing this project. We definitely have faced issues from neighborhoods, especially at our Coit Road site. Our other site is tucked away near a community garden that exists already. And so people, and it's less and, smaller. It's more meant as a demonstration area for kids. So it's a smaller site and has smaller stuff, whereas our Coit Road site is larger stock of trees going in, more established trees. And historically, the market has dealt with complaints of it not being aesthetically pleasing for the neighborhood. They have an active market garden across the street, as well as the building where they have the actual physical market. And so a lot of people in the neighborhood were already weary of the market. And so to add, green space or what they perceive as more agriculture or whatever, can be off-putting to them, which, it's not something I agree with, but I can understand where they're coming from. They've lived in the neighborhood sometimes for generations, and, now it's changed in several different ways, and they don't necessarily want it to change in the way that you are showing. So it's really important. We're still working on our neighbors and getting full buy-in. We have buy-in from some of them, which is super important, and that can help. They can then help attract and get buy-in from other people. And sometimes you're just going to have to, hopefully, you get the majority of the buy-in, but if the project goes in, you're just going to have to, do extra work to maintain it and make sure it looks good, even though that's not necessarily always the reality of urban agriculture. Agriculture isn't pristine like a park is necessarily, but that's kind of the part of the beauty of this project is that it is a green space, and more permaculture based. So we are hoping to keep it more manicured and park-like, and hopefully, we can get the buy-in then from the community, and show them that it's really an asset down the road for those that aren't necessarily completely bought in right now. And it's, it takes some time. I've worked on projects where people were totally against it, and a couple years later at a community outreach event, I've had people come up to me and tell me that they were totally against it, and then once it was in their backyard, it changed their mind, and now they're the biggest proponents, pushing for the expansion of a park area or green space. So really takes, kindness and a positive attitude in going out and showing that this is an asset and putting in the hard work to make it an asset. Next, I'd like to talk about partner organizations, specifically when it comes to people who you're partnering with on the grant, insofar as they have a specific stake in the grant, whether that is like for us, Coit Road Farmers Market is the host of one of our sites, and they will be doing the long-term care of the property and project. Obviously, we're not going to go away completely. We'll always be there as a resource, but they will be doing the majority of the work going forward in managing the site, even though we are a partner with them in it, and they are a partner with us. So partner organizations, it's super important to have not only those laid out before the grant, but to have some sort of agreement laid out before the grant, an MOU, so to speak, or some other partnership agreement. The reason this can be a challenge is with our grant specifically, we ran into an issue where we had a site that we had written into the original grant actually pull out. They weren't able to host the forest. It was one of the schools that we were going to associate with. And it was just because, we didn't have our MOU, we didn't have all our ducks in a row. And that happens. It can be an oversight. It can be, staff changes lead to relationship changes. It can be things change because things like pandemics happen or whatever. And so, unfortunately, we had an organization not be able to do this project. And, that presented a pretty big challenge and roadblock for us, but we were able to meet it head on. And the way we were able to do that is, you have to rely on your network and ask the people that and find another place to have the site specifically for, in our case. And it's also important to make sure that you're in contact with the grantor. In our case, it's NACD, but you want to make sure that the project, it's okay to change it, at the point, or what to do about it. Obviously, an easy way to get around this is by having partnership organizations in place before you start the grant writing process even, and that way you can hit the ground running, so to speak, if the grant is awarded. But if that's not the case, which it's not all the time, it's definitely important to ask for help from other partner organizations or people in your personal life and network, and then keep in good contact with your grantor, because they want to see a good project done, and they're there working with you, right? They're not some far away thing to be feared. They want to hear about how the project's going, and so if you're having issues, it doesn't hurt to reach out and say, hey, this is the issue I'm facing. This is what I'm looking to remedy it. Proactivity is always important. So yeah, definitely make sure you reach out to people. We were able to, through our network, find another school site to plant near. And thankfully, NACD was gracious enough to accommodate that change for us. And I think it's going to turn out to be, as good, if not better, than the original location. The final challenge that we faced, and I think is probably the most important when you're doing any sort of grant project, especially an urban ag grant project, is site ownership and acquisition. As I was saying before, I think it's important, to get the work done before the grant. Pre-work is of utmost importance. Having site security is one of the major challenges that face urban agriculture in the greater Cleveland area. Finding sites and being able to have full ownership over those sites is extremely difficult. We have plenty of available land, but for several reasons, it's not easy for individual farmers to acquire and hold long-term ownership of the land. And so this is, again, where that a grant, I believe, is majority pre-work. If you have all your work done before, you can hit the ground running if and when the grant money comes in, if you're awarded the grant or project. And obviously, nothing is without challenges in life. So you're going to face challenges throughout the grant, no matter what. So the more you can have done before the grant starts, the better. And you can, face the challenges as they come up without dealing with major challenges like, where am I going to put this? That was definitely an issue we faced with both sites for this grant. Obviously, we faced it with the school site because we had the original partner organization pull out, so we had to find a whole new partner organization and a new site to put this native nursery or native food forest in. And then with the Coit Road site, we had parcels in mind before writing the grant, but we hadn't gone through with the acquisition process or given the heads up beforehand to go through with the acquisition process. So once we were awarded, we kind of ran into some issues with the one city-owned parcel. A lot of times cities want to hold on to these parcels because they're looking to redevelop them into something that can provide for the economy, whether that's housing or storefront or something else. And that's really where you have to show that these projects are an asset to the community, which we truly believe that this is, not just because it's providing access to food and a green space for a disadvantaged historically community, but also, the benefits of reforestation, stormwater mitigation, soil health, You kind of have to hit them from all angles as to why this is a win for the area, the neighborhood, and everybody involved. And it can definitely be an uphill battle, but persistence is key, and coming in it with an open mind and always being able to help. And it is, at the end of the day, you're forming then another partnership, and partnerships go both ways. And so if you can show that this is an asset to the community, they'll be more willing to work with you, and you got to really work at it and show that it is at the end of the day. But then, you have a partner for life, so to speak, and potentially other projects may come of it. So, it definitely presents a unique challenge when you're having to deal with site acquisition and ownership, but it's not impossible. Although I would say it is the most important when you're dealing with projects. I'd like to just talk real quick before we move on to final thoughts, just about the success of this project. I've talked a lot about the challenges, but, through the challenge, we were able to get both sites planted and make up a lot of the time that was lost with some of the issues, and form some really good partnerships and bonds. We were able to form a good working partnership and become even more involved at the Coit Road Farmers Market. We're working on getting programs started focused at both the sites. We were able to work with and build and deepen relationships with the new city. For when our original partner organization for the school pulled out, we were able to form a new relationship with another city in our area, as well as working with some new partner organizations that we necessarily wouldn't have if the project would have gone off without a hitch. And at the Coit Road site, and we were able to form deeper relationships and tighter bonds with these partner organizations that is going to lead to more projects in the future, most definitely in collaboration and getting more good work done in the area. So at the end of the day, even though we faced these challenges, the project came out with a lot of success, and I think was even more successful than I thought originally it could be. So now, just to wrap up everything I've talked about and kind of the main takeaways and big lessons learned on this project through the challenges that we faced. First of all, from the get-go, have it a well written out vision and plan. This helps for several reasons. Obviously, it helps to keep things well documented and kind of have your beginning, middle, and end planned out. But it also can help in the event of staff changes, because that happens, and it can help things move along, as well as, good contacts for partner organizations and the vision of the project, as well as some, background and history. Ask around and keep open lines of communications. This helps, obviously when there are changes, like we faced with our partner organization at the beginning, not being able to participate anymore, but it also helps in material acquisitions and volunteer help, and all kinds of other expertise help and all kinds of other help that you may need on your project. I once heard a good quote, I was told early in my career, they can't say no if you don't ask them. And I love that quote, because it's the kind of a humorous way of dealing with the fact that, like, you're already at no if you're not asking. And obviously you have to judge your asks and when to ask, but if you're not asking for help on projects, you're probably not going to get some of the things done that you need to. And keeping open lines of communication with your grantors and other project partners is super important. It's okay to admit that you're facing challenges and things aren't going as smoothly as you want them to. The grantors want to see the project successful, so they will try and help and figure out ways to help as well. And, usually pre-work is super important. You want to get as much work as you can done before the project starts, so you can hit the ground running if and when the grant and project are awarded. This can be anything from your MOUs from your partner organizations to site acquisition to working with the community. Having community buy-in is important. And so starting early with community buy-in is another important thing to have. You really need to make sure that the community views this in the city, and all the vested interests see this as a win for the community, and something as a positive, a net positive. And finally, challenges happen. They're going to happen to your project. The only thing you can do is learn from them, and also realize it's not the end of the world, and the project can still be a resounding success even if you are facing challenges. Making sure that you stay on top of things and you're proactive when these challenges happen is important, but challenges aren't the end of a project. Just put your thinking cap on and figure out a solution and ask for help if needed.
And with that, we can start taking some questions. I'd like to thank the NACD again and Ariel for allowing us to host this or to present today. So yeah, I can answer any questions.
All right, thank you so much, Jan and Jacob. This was such good information, and I'm so happy to hear how you've turned some of your many challenges into successes and opportunities. And thank you as well for making the shout out about keeping in touch with the grantors. It's always great to hear from the grantees and hearing what all of you are up to beyond just the reports that we get quarterly as well. So thank you for that. So we do have one question in the chat box already. I know there was one about the food forest project, so thank you for sharing some information about that, Jacob. And then we also have some question related to what you actually planted in the food forest projects, what species?
Yeah, right now we have, let me try and get them all off the top of my head. Elderberry, pawpaw, chokecherry, blackberry, blueberry, strawberry, raspberry, American plum, pecan, walnut, persimmon, and I feel like I'm missing a couple, but we have I can share a list with people if they're interested. They can email me, and I have a list written. I just don't have it in front of me right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have this information on your website as well, so that people can potentially look into it?
We have a blog up about the site, and I actually have a blog due in the month that's going to be more follow-up on what I've done since the last blog. So there'll be more information up in shortly with nice pictures of a near finished project, or a near planted project at least.
Excellent. And while we're waiting for more questions from the audience, I have one for both of you. So a lot of what you shared today is excellent information for people that might be in some of the early stages of developing projects, or have already outlined funders that they would like to reach out to, or partnership organizations they'd like to work with. But I'm curious if each of you could share one tip for districts that are completely starting out in the urban ag space. If you have any thoughts that might be helpful for those complete newbies to this arena.
Jen, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Go ahead. I have to think about that one.
Okay, yeah. For me, my big thing with everything is relationships. So you're not going to get any project done without partners, whether they're actually on the grant or they're in the community or however. So if you're starting, and you have to have an idea first, like, okay, we want to do a food forest. That's easy because that's what we're doing right now. So identifying a site first of all, or multiple sites, because it's not going to be the first site you look at that's gonna work. So identifying multiple sites, and then once those sites are identified, finding community stakeholders in that area, whether that's community working groups, for-profit or nonprofit entities that might hold the land or have land in that area, municipalities, and reach out. They can't say no unless you don't ask them. And I love that because, I said in the presentation, you're starting at no. The project isn't happening until you start asking. And so talking to people, and, it might take a couple years. It might take helping on some of the projects they're working on till they can trust you as a partner and want to start helping with you. So I hope that wasn't too roundabout, but.
That's right. And it's kind of going to where the people are. So it's part and parcel of the same thing. But I think the most important thing is if you don't succeed at first, try again. And I'm just really proud of Jacob because I was just flummoxed. You know, I'm like, what's going to happen? We're going to have to give the money back. We're not going to be able to do this. Here's this new guy starting and are just going to throw him in and sink or swim. And he picked up, you could tell, positive attitude and got right down on it. And when one of the sites didn't come through, he was able to go out and figure out how to, team up with somebody else. So the Coit Road site, it's challenging. Like you said, it's the oldest farmers market in the county. It's in probably, sadly to say, one of the worst communities in the state of Ohio. And when it was at one time in the heyday of Cleveland, one of the most beautiful communities. And so really challenged there. And, you go in and do a project and here's this land that you want to do the project and then somebody buys it from the city land bank. So, all those obstacles, but you really have to believe that you have a vision and you're going to figure out, and what Jacob said, kind of getting out there and getting your introductions made and talking to people, but also thinking what their objections might be, because that'll help you. Then you're doing a sales pitch, right? So in sales 101, they always tell you, handle the objection. So that going in, what people might ask you. And it's been a learning experience for us on many, many different levels. So just go out there and do it and have that positive attitude. And it's true, if people, if you team up with them on other projects, help them, you're kind of paying it forward. And in my experience here, that has always benefited our organization over the years. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, and that's I want to touch on something that you mentioned, Jan. Jacob had said it all comes down to relationships, and you had said, Jan, that there's a lot of trust there that you need to have with both your partners as well as your staff. And I think that that's one of the greatest aspects that conservation districts have that they can offer in this space, is because they are trusted partners in the community. And so thank you both for engaging with your local stakeholders in a way that further enables that trust between all of you. And so I noticed that Leslie as well posted in the chat box that they apologize for getting late to the presentation. They were curious about the biggest barrier. So in one word, what would each of you say was the biggest barrier to getting the projects going?
Mine's 2 words, but it's site control.
Jan?
Yeah, I would say finding the appropriate sites and then connecting with people would be that's to just kind of kick it off. That would be the most difficult part. You can have the idea, but when you get ready to go out and do the project, and you got to make those connections. So that's probably the most difficult thing.
And if you two, do you work closely with USDA? And if you do, are there any specific barriers for engaging with your local USDA partners?
That's an interesting question. In my presentation, when I was talking about the seasonal high tunnel program, that was, we were co-located with NRCS at one time when I started. And then there were the internal changes there, and our staff got too big, so we couldn't accommodate them any longer in our office. But when they had Al Norwood come in with the seasonal high tunnels, it was amazing to me. Here is this guy from Mississippi, then he worked up in Michigan, comes to Cleveland and connected with people that I, in all my years, could not connect with. Al is Black, and he just got out there, but he also, I don't think it was just being Black and that he could connect with the people that Marsha Fudge and Terry Cosby wanted NRCS to connect with, but he had that can-do attitude as well. And he was just an affable guy. I missed him so much when he retired, and still chat with him on Facebook. But you know, it's attitude is that's what it's all about. And really, since that time, that I just haven't seen any evidence that the program just doesn't seem to be as strong any longer. But we do work with NRCS. We have a local work group coming up next month, and
in July.
team up with them. Yeah. And NRCS, so our district district conservationist said there's an effort nationwide to work on, guess what, a blueprint to urban agriculture. So that's something you guys should probably all watch out for.
And Cleveland will host one of the FSA county committees on urban ag as well. So there's another opportunity to continue networking there. So we are up against time here. So I encourage anyone with additional questions to reach out to Jan and Jacob. And thank you again both for turning all of these challenges into successful opportunities. It's clear you both have very positive attitudes, and thank you for bringing that to NACD and the national stage as well. So before we sign off, I do want to give Alex Schmidt, our chair of our Urban and Community Resource Policy Group, the opportunity to close us out here.
I just wanted to thank Jan and Jacob and Cuyahoga County for presenting today, and also throw out a big thanks to Scott's Miracle-Gro for making this happen for us. So thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your week and enjoy your weekend.
Thanks.
Excellent.
Enjoy summer.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Take care.